Six great civilizations built cities, organized tens of thousands of people, and then, the way we usually tell it, simply blinked out of existence. The story always sounds the same. One day priests are climbing temple steps, traders are counting goods, and farmers are grumbling about the weather, possibly the oldest unbroken tradition in the human species. The next day the plazas are silent, the roofs have collapsed, and vines are creeping through the doorways of people who were certain their city would stand forever. Told that way, it sounds like whole populations pushed back from dinner and walked out of history. But civilizations don't vanish the way a coin vanishes in a magician's hand. They leave bodies, descendants, ruins, borrowed words, reshaped landscapes, and neighbors who never forgot them. So the real puzzle is almost never where did everyone go, it's why did the system holding them together stop working? And when you line up six of the most famous cases, an uncomfortable pattern appears. Not one died from a single clean cause. There was no giant red button marked collapse. There were droughts that hollowed out governments, wars that made those droughts impossible to survive, trade failures that turned cracks into canyons, and leaders who were probably insisting everything was fine while standing next to a building that was visibly on fire. And most of the time, the people didn't disappear at all. Sometimes they moved, sometimes they rebuilt, sometimes they abandoned their rulers without ever abandoning their lives. At its height, classic Maya civilization was a web of powerful city-states across what's now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, full of palaces, reservoirs, markets, and temples that punched through the forest canopy. Their scribes used one of the ancient America's most advanced writing systems. Their mathematicians were already using zero. Then, across the 8th and 9th centuries, the great southern cities stopped raising monuments. Courts collapsed, populations fell, and some centers emptied out. For a long time, this got called the Maya disappearance. One problem, millions of Maya people are alive today. What collapsed wasn't a people, it was one political and urban system in one region. So what broke it? Repeated droughts hammered a society feeding dense populations through rain-fed farming, an awkward crisis for kings who claimed sacred power over the natural order, right as the gods appeared to cancel the rain. But drought alone explains nothing. They'd survived dry spells before. This was a landscape of rival kingdoms constantly at war, and conflict strangled farming and trade at the exact moment cooperation mattered most. It wasn't one fall, it was a chain of local breakdowns feeding on each other. Some people died. Many simply left for places with steadier water and safer neighbors. The forest crept back over the ceremonial cores and created the illusion that a civilization had been swallowed whole. The second case is stranger because these people left us writing we still can't read. Over 4,000 years ago, the Indus civilization spread across today's Pakistan and northwestern India. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa with planned streets, drainage, standardized bricks, and far-reaching trade. But it left no royal tombs, no giant statues of a single ruler, no readable inscriptions. Its script is still undeciphered, which makes the whole civilization feel eerily silent. Around 1900 BCE, the system started changing. Trade thinned, standardization loosened, cities lost population. Old theories blamed invaders, but there's no empire-wide destruction layer and no signed confession. The stronger thread is environmental. The monsoon weakened over long stretches. Rivers shifted course and people drifted eastward towards smaller rural communities, carrying their crops, crafts, and bloodlines with them. From a brick city's point of view, that looks like collapse. From a family chasing reliable rainfall, walking away might have been the smartest move on the table. In the canyons of the American Southwest, ancestral Puebloan communities built astonishing settlements at Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde, including cliff dwellings tucked beneath sandstone walls. By the end of the 13th century, the Mesa Verde region had largely emptied. The buildings stayed, the people seemed gone. Early outsiders called them a vanished race, erasing descendants standing within walking distance of the ruins. Modern Pueblo peoples, including the Hopi and Zuni, carry direct ties to these ancestors. So why leave? A brutal decades-long drought made harvests unreliable, and there are signs of rising conflict. But nobody evaporated into the desert. People migrated south and east through kinship networks, often to places they were already connected to. The cliff dwellings weren't abandoned because their builders forgot architecture. They were abandoned because architecture can't make rain, and sometimes survival requires leaving. Around the 11th century, Cahokia became the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico, up to 20,000 people, plazas, palisades, and more than 100 earthen mounds, the largest still looming over the landscape today. It was built basket by indigenous laborers, and it pulled in migrants from all over. Then, after its peak, it declined, abandoned by the 15th century. Flooding, drought, deforestation, inequality, and political conflict have all been blamed, and researchers still disagree about the weight of each. But a city is a daily agreement among strangers: supply food, follow rules, respect authority. Strip away the benefits while the obligations remain, and the agreement dissolves. Cahokia's people didn't need to be wiped out, they simply dispersed. Yet early scholars refused to believe indigenous peoples built the mounds, inventing a mythical mound builder race to justify seizing the land. So Cahokia was made to disappear twice, once when it emptied, and again when storytellers cut it loose from indigenous history. Rapa Nui is famous for the moai, massive stone ancestors raised by Polynesian settlers. For decades, the story was that the islanders destroyed themselves, cut down every tree to move statues, exhausted their resources, and crashed before Europeans arrived in 1722. A perfect morality play, also far too simple. Yes, the island lost its palm forest, and the people adapted with clever techniques like rock gardens. But recent archaeology and genetics don't show the catastrophic pre-contact crash the story requires. The real collapse came after contact. Introduced disease, 19th century slave raids, and colonial violence ground the population down to a fraction of its size. The old story quietly shifted the blame, turning a history of resilience and externally inflicted catastrophe into a tale of people who couldn't manage their environment. Rapa Nui survived deforestation and isolation. Its descendants are alive today, defending their language and their island. Norse settlers reached Greenland in the late 10th century, building farms and churches and exporting walrus ivory across medieval Europe. Then the settlements vanished. One of the last records is a wedding at Valsey Church in 1408. Not a doomed final message, just two people getting married while historians centuries later wonder where everyone went. No massacre, no single disaster. Instead, several pressures tightened at once. The climate cooled toward the Little Ice Age, sea ice choked off sailing, farms struggled, and European markets abandoned walrus ivory for elephant ivory. Ships came less often, iron and timber got scarce. The Norse adapted, leaning on seals, but adaptation has a ceiling when you're small, isolated, and cut off from trade. Some died in the hard years, others likely slipped away to Iceland or Europe. Greenland wasn't just beaten by cold, its reason to exist eroded, until the last residents shut the doors on buildings nobody would reopen for centuries. 6 civilizations, 6 disappearances, and not one shared explanation. The pattern isn't that nature destroys civilizations, nature applies pressure. It's societies that decide, through their institutions and cooperation and conflict, whether that pressure becomes disaster. A drought doesn't overthrow a king. It reveals whether food was stored, water was shared, and leaders were trusted. A city doesn't just empty, thousands of families. Each decide that leaving beats staying. Collapse is what those decisions look like from far away. We keep confusing civilizations with their governments and monuments. The palaces close, the writing stops, and we declare the civilization dead. But the farmers are still farming. The descendants still carry the languages, the foods, the memories. A civilization is not a species. Its collapse doesn't require its people to go extinct. The Maya didn't vanish. Pueblo peoples never left the Southwest. Rapa Nui did not commit collective suicide. Their worlds only changed shape, and one day ours will too. Some future archaeologist may stand in a flooded coastal city, study our abandoned towers, and decide the sacred glass office buildings were deserted after a solemn ritual known as the Quarterly Performance Review. They may call us mysterious, but we won't have been mysterious to ourselves. Just ordinary people responding to rising costs, failing systems, changing weather, and opportunities somewhere else. Because civilizations almost never disappear in one dramatic moment. First, the reasons to stay disappear. Then the people carry the history somewhere new,